Thank you very much, and again, it's a great pleasure. I will talk about Dr. Borlaug's scientific legacy, but we have heard about it, and what I really would like to talk about, how some of the things he has started have evolved, and how we still utilize this today. Yesterday, you were in the field, and what I will not do today, I will not talk about what CIMMYT is all doing in research. You have a lot heard about it. We just have completed in El Batan a completely new lab for buildings, including a Biosafety 2 building, which was funded by the Carlos Slim Foundation. And I think we have now absolute state-of-the-art facilities in Mexico. And what we want to do is we really want to reach out with the advanced research institutes in the world and link up with them and then bring the best technologies for wheat improvement worldwide and in particular for developing countries. As said, I will not talk about this, but I would like to go through a couple of other things addressing here. Norman Borlaug's scientific legacy, I mean, when I looked at it, I think it's the most logical thing what happened to him. Norman Borlaug started as a fighter, and he was fighting rust, and that's why he came to Mexico. Then he noticed, I will not beat rust if I don't accelerate my breeding scheme, and he invented the shuttle breeding. Then he noticed, well, if I have rust-resistant varieties without yield potential, that is really only protecting but not really increasing. So he brought in the RHT genes and the yield potential and increased that. These varieties then became recognized that they also can make a major impact in other countries, but he noticed if I don't have a systematic way of distributing germplasm, I will not have so much impact. So he started international nurseries and germplasm sharing. And the other thing is, okay, I can make the best germplasm available, but if there are no scientists in the countries which can utilize and exploit it, this effort will not lead to much either. And so he started in the early 60s a training program which is going on until today. After his retirement, Dr. Borlaug worked a lot on maize in Africa and other crops, but at the end of his life cycle basically closed when he came back to rust. And this is a slide when Dr. Borlaug in 2009 lectured the world wheat rust specialists on how to tackle rust. And I think so that led to the establishment of the Borlaug Global Rust Initiative. And I really think we should be a little bit thankful to stem rust, because who knows, without stem rust, Norman Borlaug never had become a wheat breeder. Okay, now, Dr. Borlaug was a very outspoken visionary. He said the seriousness or magnitude of the world food problem should not be underestimated. Recent success in expanding wheat, rice, and maize production in Asian countries offers the possibility of buying 20 to 30 years of time. He said this in 1969. And also Norman Borlaug was always extremely clear that the Green Revolution only buys time, but it's not the long-term solution. He was very clear, and some of the critics of the Green Revolution just ignored this. Nobody was more aware than Norman Borlaug. But did we use this time to get ready for the next Green Revolution? Now, if we look at the impact which Dr. Borlaug had, the wheat varieties which were developed. This was a study which compared what would have happened if there had been no productivity gains from crop germplasm improvement for the period from 1965 to 2004. And what you see here, that the impact on wheat production had been highest. With other words, the gains made by the wheat breeders had the biggest impact, because without crop improvement, the yields, depending on the model today, would be between 43 and 60% lower than they are in developing countries. This is the red one. In the developed world, it looks slightly different because there was a lot of agronomy interventions, and worldwide, we still would have increases. But the message here is that for wheat, the impact was bigger even than for rice, where the productivity would be about 20% lower. And for maize, the productivity gains were lower, and that is because in most of the developing countries, the gains have been low. I think if the study would be done now, that would change, but this was the period. The other way around, looking at this here, it also would mean that if there had been no gains from crop improvement, the wheat prices today would be 150 to 250% higher than they are. So just think about the impact of this on global food security. Now, I have to say that unfortunately, the impact of the past is not really assurance for investment in the future, because at the CGIAR level, currently wheat is one of the lower funded CRPs. And I hope this can be rectified, because wheat is a tremendously important crop for global food security. Okay, now look at the achievements. UN Development Goals. The percentage of people living in less than $1.25 per day fell from 47 in 1999 to 22% in 2010. Globally, the proportion of undernourished people decreased from 23% in 1990 to 15%. Okay, I think that is really an achievement. However, in 2012, 1.2 billion people were still living in extreme poverty. Today, more people in South Asia and Sub-Saharan Africa live today with less than $1.5 a day than the entire population at the beginning of the Green Revolution. The number of people living on less than $2 per day is the same as in 1981. So is this achievements? I think, yes, we have taken a lot of people out of poverty, but the challenge is still tremendous, and that is just, as Dr. Conway has pointed out, exacerbated by lower gaining yields, climate change, etc., etc. There is another issue I would like to get your attention. We hear a lot about of slowing down in yield gains. And in this slide here, you see how long it took on a global scale to increase the average yield by 500 kilograms. And you can see that this period, since 1961, is pretty constant. It's between 12, 10, and 13 years. How long it will take for the next one, I don't know, but I hope we can maintain this. So, the point here is that in kilograms, the gains have not slowed down as much as it's often presented in percent. But the point is, these gains are not enough. If we take the prediction of FAO, the World Bank, and others on the future demand, if we continue linear, same progress as we had in the past over the last 50 years, we will have a global average by 2050 of around 4.5 tons. The predictions by the FAO and the World Bank is that we need to reach 5 tons to meet the global demand. And many people now start to argue 60% increase is just keeping pace with the population, but we really should double the productivity, the production, so we can take more people out of poverty and address the dietary changes which are coming. So if we take these three scenarios, very simple scenarios, but it means that in the FAO prediction we are 100 million tons short in 2050, and if we take the doubling, we are 300 million tons short in 2050. Now we have some time to address this, but crop improvement is a long-term investment, and we better start and get really serious about this, because in agriculture to catch up is not really easy. Okay, so it's not too late to make a big difference, but I think what is absolutely needed is a concerted action of the wheat world community to work together, share results, and make technologies available. This here is, I referred yesterday a little bit, this here is also going back to the legacy of wheat improvement. What you see here is on the red countries are the countries where Mexican wheats have been directly introduced and released as a variety. The blue ones show you that the countries which used Mexican wheats and crossed it and released varieties. Basically, every single wheat-growing country which used CIMMYT germplasm has benefited from this, and I hope it stays like this in the future. I have mentioned it and emphasized it yesterday, but I would like to do it again. We talk a lot about new technologies, and I think transferring new technologies, for example here in Mexico, into CIMMYT elite germplasm, you have the ideal vehicle to distribute it to all the wheat communities around the world. And I think that is a super efficient strategy of transferring new technology to many wheat programs around the world. Another issue, it was global climate change, and a lot of modeling is going on. And I produced this slide here to show that already we knew for a long time what heat is doing to wheat. In this slide here, you see the average yield in the Yaqui Valley over the last 35 years plotted against the average minimum temperature during the wheat growing period. And you can see that there is a tremendous, isn't there a pointer here? Ah, okay, sorry. Okay, and you can see this relation is extremely linear. And you can also see that we all talk about 2 degrees Celsius increase. If the temperature increases by 2 degrees, you lose 1.4 tons here in this environment. This is what we are confronted with. Now, we have developed some new cultivars. This here is the yield of a new cultivar which has released a few 3-4 years ago, and it really is a hallmark because it could cope much better, but we also have to see that the temperature was relatively low in the last years. But we have germplasm now, which is in this category, so progress from breeding is possible, but it is getting more and more difficult to achieve this. One way of doing it, and we will hear later more about it, is looking into yield potential. And these are some results from the latest trial, which has been conducted here. And what is so exciting about it is here, these were some yield potential lines identified by the physiology group for particular traits, and they were crossed with the main objective to increase biomass, because without more biomass, it will be difficult to increase the yield potential. You can see that even the yield here was about 5% higher, but what is very encouraging is that the biomass is 10% higher. And this was only the first round of crossing. So I'm very optimistic that over the next decade or so, we really can increase the biomass and then maintain the harvest index and convert this into grain. You will hear more about it later on Friday about the wheat yield, International Wheat Yield Partnership, but I think we have some very interesting results coming. We have talked a lot about this year, the shuttle breeding, and I will not go through this one anymore. But what I wanted to show here is that the International Wheat Improvement Network today addresses we had over the years about 600 cooperators. And I think this is a tremendously valuable tool, and we are so thankful that the cooperators have returned data to us. And the data we accumulated over the years was we have run about 17,000 genotypes on more than nearly 30,000 locations for yield trials, and we produced 12 million data points. For the observation nurseries, even more. We have today distributed about 70,000 genotypes, grown in 58,000 trials, and produced about 28 million data points. They are in our database, and they have led to a lot of very good publications. And what is also unique about it is that we have the seed of all the entries which end into these trials. We can take them out and use them, either grow them in trials again, do molecular analysis. And we also have for all of them the pedigrees, and that is tremendously important for some of the new tools which are coming, for example, genomic selection, because the coefficient of parentage is an extremely good predictor of performance. So I think this here shows you what has been accumulated. It has been used, I think, extremely well. For example, I got my PhD out of it, so it was really a good investment, but for me at least. But what we also want to do is, we really would like to recognize the international cooperators who participate. And from next year on, we will have the International Wheat Improvement Network Cooperator Award. And I'm very proud to announce this here. And it means that all cooperators that return data will be entered into a raffle, and the 2 winners every year will be invited to CIMMYT Wheat program here in Obregon for 2 weeks. So I hope that you will take this as an encouragement to return data, work with us, and be a good cooperator in the International Wheat Improvement Network. Another thing is, we talk a lot about wide adaptation. Norman Borlaug was known for wide adaptation. But I would like to put it into a different context. Wide adaptation also means adaptation to global climate change. In this slide here, you can see that the countries which are marked red here have very often released sister lines or the same variety. One variety in the history was released in more than 30 countries. So we have, I made this point yesterday, we have brought the allele packages together which really stand for yield, heat and drought tolerance, and also disease resistance. But what I think is that wheat is extremely well buffered against some of the threats which come in the future, because we have to recognize one thing. Global climate change will not only change the global climate, it will tremendously change the climate at one location over years. And what we see is more and more variation. Secondly, we have to, I know a lot of people advise, grow different varieties. Reality is that many smallholder farmers have less than a hectare. How many different varieties can they grow? They will possibly grow one variety, and that is the most widely grown in the region. And that cultivar has to be buffered against climate change. And I think we have the right alleles together, because otherwise, a farmer, he doesn't know what the climate will be, and so he has to put his money on one variety, and that variety is better widely adapted to the changes at one location over a year. The shuttle breeding has been done a lot, but what I wanted to refer to here, because it's very important for the future breeding strategies. The shuttle was done in the past in Mexico, and when UG99 occurred, we started to shuttle all the material to Kenya for 2 generations. Now, we had not the slightest idea what that would do to adaptation and yield potential. And so we ran the entire program in parallel. Whatever went to Kenya was also grown here. Tremendously increase in work, but we wanted to make sure that we don't use yield potential. And now we have the first results. And I mean, this is really was very, very encouraging. The yield potential of the lines, which have gone for selection for 2 generations in Kenya, have basically the same yield potential or yield distribution than the lines which were selected in Mexico. And that is really very important, because it would indicate that we can have such shuttles also with other environments in the world. This slide here has been shown before, but I wanted to introduce this here also. When Dr. Borlaug started, he had I think he had a very well-funded project. And this here shows the impact of the Borlaug Global Rust Initiative, which is also, I think, a very well-funded research project. And due to this, there has been tremendous impact. Think about, in 2006, the Borlaug Global Rust Initiative was, formed, and within a few years, so many varieties were released to one of the most major threats. And I think that is a tremendous response of the world wheat community to this threat. And what the message here is, yes, the world community can respond to threats, but it must be supported through the respective investments. After we have seen Kenya, what we plan now in CRP wheat, in the Consortium Research Program wheat, to really push much more for phenotyping platforms. What does this mean? Today, the major bottleneck for using molecular tools or developing them is that we do not have enough precise phenotypic data. And so we have looked at key locations around the world for particular traits which are of importance for wheat improvement in developing countries. And so we would like to establish in the various parts of the world breeding programs or platforms which are really well equipped to do screening for particular traits. I will not go through all of this, and this is in the initial discussions, but I really believe this is the way to go forward for wheat. We will get more precise data. We possibly can increase the number of germplasm that is screened, and also we can make material much earlier available to national programs for selection in their region to the specific traits. And I really hope that this can be implemented over the next 5 years, And the estimates are that for each of the hubs which we have here would be somewhere between 500,000 to plus minus $1 million. And we will do a lot of here. Another hub here is the Inter-Turkey CIMMYT International Winter Wheat Improvement Program, which is based here in Turkey. And they also have to develop a set of locations which then would be used as platforms. But I think this here can have a tremendous impact because it combines faster breeding gains with more precise data, which then can be used to again accelerate our breeding gains. Another area in wheat where we are really very, very short. In wheat we are lucky to have, I don't know how many wild species, relatives. In wheat we are unlucky because transgenic wheat is still not a reality. But we have this reservoir of genes here. And what you see here, this is an estimate of the accessions for the different species which are in the CIMMYT in the world collections. And here you can see what percentage has been utilized. Genetic resources are extremely underutilized in wheat, and I know for good reasons why, because it's very, very complicated to transfer variation, new genes into wheat. But we have now really new tools, and I believe with the new tools we can jump some of the actions which was needed in the past and really transfer this material here, the genes, the variability, much, much faster into wheat, and then this is still a non-transgenic. Finally, Norman Borlaug's unfinished business. Norman Borlaug started a Triticale program, and he was an outspoken proponent of Triticale until the end of his life. Unfortunately, Triticale did not really make it. And I really would like to have a plea to think about those who can influence international agriculture, whether it's not really worth to reinvest. In Mexico is growing interest for Triticale, but I believe that we have to revisit on a global scale because Triticale is extremely tolerant to most of the micronutrient deficiencies in soils. It is tolerant to alkaline soil, to acid soil, to a lot of the problems. And I really think we should revisit this because it has so tremendous potential. And then we also could put a check mark on Dr. Borlaug's last legacy he left with us. Finally, I would like to come to one area. Dr. Borlaug always talked about breeding, but watch the movie from 1987, how much he emphasized agronomy. And he knew it very well because the Green Revolution was as much an agronomy revolution as it was a breeding revolution. Without changing agronomy, the semi-dwarf short coleoptile weeds could never have been really made it. And that's why many of you have seen this slide, but I also would like to emphasize it here once more. We develop extremely nice cars, and we want to make sure that these nice cars can go fast, so we build beautiful roads. I think we are capable of developing beautiful wheat, that at least how it looks like to me, and then we grow them in miserable conditions. What do you expect from a cultivar like this here to perform there? This car here on a rough road would also not go more faster than 20 kilometers. So we need to assure that we can exploit the potential of our varieties, and that is the challenge for agronomy. And I really think agronomy in the last, it's coming back, but for nearly a decade it has been really ignored. I'm very, very pleased to see more investments coming, but we still have a long way to exploit the potential of our varieties through better agronomy. And finally, as I said, Dr. Borlaug was also an advocate, a very strong advocate of training. Over the last 40 years, we have trained more than 1,200 people here in Obregon in our organized course, and where we really have made progress over Dr. Borlaug. You can see in his period, there were less than 10% of the participants were females. In the last 8 years, we brought it up to 25%, and I'm now really pleased to say that this year, 40% of the trainee participants here in Obregon are females. And I think, honestly, bringing females more into agriculture has a lot of benefits. And one of them is if you have discussions, if you have only males in the discussions, it can be very rough. but I think females really bring more rational into many discussions. So there is really a need for having more of them. And this is the one before the last. This was a famous quote from John F. Kennedy. We have the means, we have the capacity to eliminate hunger from the face of this earth. We need only the will. And I really hope that by now we have the will, because the last thing is the ultimate legacy of Dr. Borlaug was, take it to the farmers. And Dr. Borlaug's last words were, take it to the farmers, when he talked to Art Gladd and Bill Round about the nitrogen sensor technology. I think no other words could summarize better what Dr. Borlaug stood for. Farmers, poor farmers and their family were always in the center of his thinking. This was, is, and will remain the ultimate goal of CIMMYT. If we fail in this aspect, we fail in everything we do, and we would not pay the tribute to Dr. Borlaug he deserves. Thank you very much. Thank you.